Well guys, I just saw Hereditary. I know I'm kind of late on this one, but I'm still excited to talk to you guys about one of the most critically acclaimed horror films of recent years. So Hereditary is about a family that suffers a tragedy, a death in the family, and this death in the family starts to lead to supernatural events occurring. And that's about as much as I can explain about the plot without going into pretty much every scene that happens in this movie. So Hereditary is interesting because it is the latest in a new trend that people are calling grown-up horror. These are horror films like Get Out, ones that use horror elements to deal with socio-political or psychological issues. I'm torn on this new trend because on the one hand I do want my horror films to have substance, I do want them to deal with different things and different topics, and I don't want them to be just some filmmaker trying to get the audience to jump out of their seat every couple of minutes. So I appreciate the new trend's emphasis on story and substance. What I don't appreciate is the self-righteousness and self-importance that so many of these films seem to have, especially when I don't think they're always particularly deserved of that self-importance. I liked Get Out quite a bit. I thought it was ushering in this new, more cerebral and psychological wave of horror films, and in some ways it did, but I can't say the results here are particularly encouraging. Yes, this is a controversial and divisive film. It is dividing critics and audiences. Of course, it's a critical darling because of the psychological issues it deals with, the way it tries to deal with grief and resentment, and the way families can fall apart at the seams. And I respect this film's attempt to deal with that. I respect the technique and craftsmanship behind the film, and I respect the performances given by the cast. But where I side with audiences is that frankly I find the story to be overly convoluted, the tone to be overly bleak and depressing and disparaging. And frankly, I just don't think this movie earned the suffering that it subjected to the audience. Like I said before, this film reeks of self-importance. It throws in all this weird, disturbing, cerebral imagery that seems to be hinting at something, but frankly, I don't think it's hinting at anything more than the fact that the director thought this idea would be cool and didn't really think about how it would fit in a cohesive story. And that's really the main problem here. We have not a story, but a series of tangents that build on themselves and continue to get more and more and more ridiculous. This movie starts out as a family drama instigated by supernatural events. And I can say that for the first 30 minutes or so, I was engaged with the movie. I was interested to see where it went. I thought the performances were very strong. I still had problems with the movie, but I definitely thought it was going somewhere interesting, but it just doesn't. The whole death of the mother is basically dropped around the midway point and not brought up again because the movie is caught up with all these other ridiculous elements that are being thrown in there. And this means that the pacing is totally botched. It never picks up any urgency or momentum. And honestly, I really did not think this movie would ever end by the hour mark. I thought this movie had devolved into something so self-indulgent and so trite and pointless that I was just so done with the movie, and I just was sitting there waiting for the end credits to come up. I am being serious. I'm not going to say I hated the movie, but I will say that I found it an extreme test of my patience, and I do not blame people for walking out on this movie at all. I was tempted to do so more than once. And the mark of a bad horror movie is that when it finally gets to that climax and it starts really giving you everything it has, all the disturbing imagery, it just becomes laughable. I'm being honest here, there's nothing that freaked me out or nothing that really disturbed me or unnerved me in any real way. It was a bunch of weird imagery, I think for the sake of weird imagery. And people can throw around different interpretations. I encourage that, but that doesn't change the fact that while I was sitting in the theater, my first impulse was to laugh at mostly everything that happened during the climax. I found this to be a poor man's Babadook that followed much of the similar beats of that movie, but without any of the tension, the suspense, the cohesiveness that made that movie so effective. Here, they threw in everything but the kitchen sink, and for me, almost nothing stuck. I do find the performances to be engaging, particularly the son, played by, I think his name is Alex Wolff. He was also in My Friend Dahmer, and he was very good in that. But the characters, for me, are just another negative, because all they really do is cry and scream. Again, I just don't think the movie earned my interest to continually subject me to these very bleak, very hard to watch scenes. I know it sounds like I hated this movie. I didn't. There are actually some things in the first act that I found quite effective. And again, I respect the technique and craftsmanship behind this movie and the performances. But the writing, the story, the self-importance, the self-indulgence, I can't get behind that. So please don't think I'm just trying to trash on this movie because it's trying to do something different. I have actually seen this done much, much better in several other movies, what it's trying to do. So if you like Hereditary, kudos to you. I wished I did. Let me know why you liked it so much, because I'm trying to honestly figure out why it's considered the masterpiece that it is, because I just don't see that. And guys, if you didn't like this movie, if you walked out, know that you are not alone in your feelings. I did not have a good time with this. I would not see it again. I would not recommend it.